So Michael Burry back on Twitter last month talking about how the eventual crash will come for meme stocks and cryptos, guys. But this raises a bigger question and a different question, and that is about what is to come next. In this video, we're going to tell you about his famous now GME trade where he made an undisclosed amount of money. We have different figures from different sources. We're going to tell you about a few of them here. But how did he spot this trade? How much did he make potentially on the GME long, and how did no one else, for whatever reason, not find this first? So let's jump right into things here, guys, and talk a little bit about how this all started and why Michael Burry was the first on GME.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people heard about the short squeeze and Reddit, but before all of that, I just want to do a couple things here. I'll pull up a daily chart so you can see August of 2020, and I've kind of hidden what happens in the future, but GameStop had hit the low of 240, a high of 640 was active, and then in August 16th and then 19th, trading at about $4.60. And I'm going to show you, and this is what I'm reading off of here, Business Wire. This is a letter that he wrote to the board. And the key thing here, he actually at the time owned about 3% of the shares of GameStop. But what he pointed out was that they had a share repurchase authorization of 300 million shares, which had 240 million remaining on that buyback authorization. They had double that in cash on hand. The company was sitting in a good cash position. They had already determined that $6 2 months before was an interesting and a good price for a buyback. The stock was heavily shorted at the time. So all of a sudden, he said, you have the perfect situation and perfect storm for GameStop to repurchase their own shares at a value and then suddenly cause an upward price movement in the stock. And so he sent that letter to the board. He was already in position. He potentially had accumulated some more shares there, but he did his diligence. He had been following this story obviously pretty closely, had a sound understanding of their cash position and what the potential was. And then he got active. He owned shares, and he then advocated towards the board.
So let's talk about point number two. Like, how much did he actually make? So how do you spot the trade? Obviously, Michael Burry digs deep into research and exactly like that, sending out the letters, had the name, the Scion Fund, everything like that. I'm going to use the same thing. So this is a Market Insider, and again, Business Insider. We're just looking at these dates. August 22nd here, 2019. And right here, the letter revealed Scion owns 3%. Neil just did this, but $10 million worth, roughly 3%. So I just use, and I'm going to show you a sheet here, 3 million shares, $10.6 million investment are the numbers that we're using. So we're just going to go over this quickly right here. So there's the 3 million shares, right, in August of 2020, right? So that's when he bought those shares. It was August 19th, the letter goes out. So I just do the 10 million divided by 3.3, right? So that's the share price. So 10.6 divided by 3 gets us that share price. Now let's go over, that's the gross, how much he spent, right? It says it right there in the article, 10.6 million. Then, now, like Neil said, there are talk about him maybe buying another 400,000 shares or so, getting this to 3.4 million. But let's just talk about now the filings. So files it out, selling 1.3 million at approximately the end of September, only was holding 1.7 million shares as per the filing. So roughly, and we just did a rough price there at the end of September, $10.50 a share. You could check the charts like Neil was doing it. That's 13.6 million. So he's already made the money. Then he sells the rest of the 1.7 million shares. And this is where it gets a little bit shady because we don't know. It just, as of December 30th, we know that he had no position. That's a fact. So again, according to the filings, so the price anywhere from October 1st to December 30th was roughly $9 to $22. So I think I was a little bit, pretty good, pretty conservative. Roughly $15 a share. The math works out. So 13 plus 25 minus the 10. We've got a big windfall there of 28.55 million in profit. So whether or not he made, you can add back that 10 and say he cashed out there, would have been roughly 40 million minus the 10 that he made. That's a 28.55. More impressive though, Brendan, also stated in this article as well that friend and, fellow research, Chewy founder from Chewy fame, Ryan Cohen, followed with a 13% stake. So if you're going to say that a 3% stake was roughly 3 million shares, Ryan Cohen followed with about a 10 million share position as well. So his math is going to be close to the hundreds of millions, because we know that he didn't sell as of December 30th. So here's two real smart guys. Michael Burry leads the way there. How did he find it? Neil talked about that. Here's the rough math of approximately a 30 million share win, or $30 million windfall. These are all rough estimates, Brendan.
All right, so the third point here, guys, how did nobody else spot this? Why was he able to find this so much earlier than everyone else? And the simple fact is, and as Neil stated, this is a guy who's famous for the housing crash and shorting the housing market to make a big gain on that. And that all came from research and doing the work. And this is a guy that, the attention to detail is there. He puts in the work, he puts in the effort to find these opportunities, in this case, way before anyone else did, to a point where, a guy like Ryan Cohen, Sean, comes in maybe after the fact to ride the coattails a little bit here. But the next kind of interesting point here, how far does that go? And then what comes next for a guy like Michael Burry?
Yeah, so how far does it go in terms of his preparation? And I want to talk about this because we did say, how do you know how so far in advance? And I kind of hinted at this before, and a couple of points here. In his shareholder note, which he sent here on the 16th. The stock was trading at 16th. The stock was trading at about $4.60, depending on when you peg it. The short interest he noted in that letter as of July 31st, and that's going to be when it was trading literally 15% lower, was about 57 million shares. 63% of the float was short. He noted that here. He also stated in the letter that 2 months prior to him sending the letter, so you go from August all the way back into June, in the middle of June, this was way back in here when he stated the board felt that $6 was a good and reasonable buyback price. And if they were willing to pay that much, and he had seen the stock go up that high, and they were willing to pay that much in the short interest, he had been plotting this trade. And if you look at that average price that Sean mentioned, for him to have a 350 average price, there might have been some buying going on early on in the year. Whether or not that's true, let's leave the speculation out of it. But this is months and months worth of preparation in analyzing the stock and the cash position before he even gets to that point. So we talk about the diligence. He sends a letter and he's accumulated 3 million shares by this point. But if you look at what he stated in that letter, you're talking about research that had to have been at least 2 to 3 months in advance before he advocates towards the board.
Yeah, I did want to bring it up too as well, that you sort of have to, and a couple quotes here that I found about Michael Burry, and it's just like, if you're going to be a great investor, you have to fit the style of who you are. Obviously, Michael Burry, a risk taker, a gambler, right? You saw what he did in the housing market, shorted it when everything was booming, did the research there. And then this is another quote here: I try to buy shares of unpopular companies when they look like roadkill, and then sell them when they've been polished up a bit. That's literally, we already talked about it, but that's exactly what Michael Burry did here with GameStop, right? People were talking about the digitization of gaming and the selling of everything online, Best Buys of the world, Amazon, things like that. Who's actually going to walk into a store of GameStop, right? Here's GameStop on the 1 minute chart right now, 160, 165 today. But, who's going to actually sit there and go into, or line up and go into a GameStop, right? So these are some of the things that were going through his mind. And obviously you have to be that kind of an investor, willing to take risk if you're going to get those kind of returns. Congratulations to both Michael Burry, Ryan Cohen, and really anybody else who got part of this trade.
So this raises a few interesting points and a few interesting questions here, guys, that we should address. And those are simply, A, how can we, maybe participate in this, or how can we maybe see beforehand what is happening here so we can have the opportunity to participate in this, and what is to come next? And, we're just throwing this out there. So this is not our opinion, guys. This is what Michael Burry said. Again, he went on Twitter back in June saying that meme stocks, that cryptocurrencies are all going to come to an epic crashing end. So is this maybe his next kind of thought, or was he just kind of throwing bait out there just to see what would happen?
Yeah, and I want to show some of those points, and we can talk about some of those points in a second, because I think, could you have followed his GameStop trade? Look, 13D filings, you can always look those up at the SEC. I mean, this is just it here. You'd have to zoom in. You could see, disclosed that he held 3.4 million. Based on class, it was 5% at the time, so it necessitated that filing. Now, whether or not you can do the same type of research, that's why we outlined the things that he looked for and the things that he found. Maybe you can spot that in advance if you do similar research. That's neither here nor there, but you can always look to see what one of these firms and the positions that they currently hold. Now, he is famous for making some interesting notes here, guys, and then talking about this. Markets have now bubbled in a dangerous way. He's been on and off Twitter several times. People say, I didn't warn last time. I did, but no one listened. It's just over and over again. And he has said, so Elon Musk, I am short Tesla. He has commented about leveraging the crypto space being an issue and there being a crash and the meme stocks going down. Candidly, he sold GameStop before it could have earned him billions, right? So you take it with a grain of salt, but he has made these warnings publicly. From what I can see, he has shorted Tesla. I'm not sure exactly what price he's got. It could be in the 600 range or so, but he did go short in Tesla, and he has believed that there is that crash coming. And that's his opinion, not necessarily ours. We've shown you he's been right in the past, so people are going to take interest whenever he says something publicly, even when he goes on a Twitter rant.
I mean, yeah, he missed this. I mean, here's the daily chart. I mean, we're talking about getting out right here. Like, how crazy does that look? That's December 31st at about $20, right? So if he holds any of those, your 10x is only right here, 200, let alone where we're going upside on that trade. So he could have made a hell of a lot more money. But, here it is. This is just something, again, people looking right now. How can you find the next? I mean, it's short float. There's a lot of different aspects in there, but traders continue to look for names that have high short floats, and those names continue to run today. We're calling them meme stocks now. This sort of was the creation. The GameStop was the creation. We've had AMC follow it. There's been other names since then, BlackBerry and a bunch of other names that have come to light through this kind of realization of maybe, Wall Street getting ahead of themselves on shorting some of these names and playing with the wrong derivatives and so on and so forth. So I think the power now with Reddit, YouTube, videos like this, other videos that are out there, Twitter, we can all now become part of the same group and look for very, very similar setups. I don't know if one will happen like this again, but GameStop was a great one.
The information is readily available and easily accessible thanks to a lot of the sources mentioned here, guys. So is this the start of something new for Michael Burry? That remains to be seen, but lots of great information there on how he, first of all, constructed that GME trade and was able to capitalize it the way he did. Here's Valeria.
Hey guys, thank you for sharing this interesting information. Dear viewers, please subscribe to this channel to see more informative content.